So we're learning Kuntres Acharon, which is the fifth section of the Tanya, known as the later pamphlet. And what this refers to is comments that the author made on his own writing that he felt needed clarity because at first glance they seemed to contradict some of the things that he said. This is the content of the first 6 essays in this fifth section of Tanya. Okay? Now, I see Avi's here. Welcome back. And we are using the lessons in Tanya. If you have that book, would be best, because I am reading some of the notes from there due to the complexity of this part of Tanya. Today, we're going to learn about a very important thing, and it's relevant to mitzvahs. In the morning, Moshe, before we do the prayer called Baruch Sha'omar, which is towards the beginning of the morning service, when we rise, it's the first time we're obligated to rise in the morning service. We take our front 2 tzitzis from our talit or our undergarment, the tzitzis, and we say that prayer. Before we say that prayer, which is called again Baruch She'omar, blessed is the one who said, referring to God, who made the heavens and the earth and everything else, we say a very interesting 2-line statement which begins with the words L'shem Yichud Kudusha Brichu, for the purpose of unity of God, Kudusha Brichu Ushchinte, and his divine presence. I mentioned yesterday, in Chabad, we say it only once a day. Many others say it before each mitzvah. So, for example, we're counting the Omer 49 days from the second night of Passover, Pesach, till Shavuos. 49 days. We're counting down to the giving of Torah, right? So, this is called Sfiras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. If you go into a traditional shul, not a Chabad shul, I would say more of a Hasidic shul, you'll hear them say, before they make the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Al Sfiras HaOmer, they say, L'shem Yichud, and you can hear them screaming out, for the sake of unity. What are they talking about? What are they doing? Why is that necessary? Because the way they believe and they follow is that before you do a mitzvah, that's a mitzvah of a mitzvah nature, you are to say this idea of the unification caused by the mitzvah. So this opens an entire arena of discussion. What happens when we do a mitzvah? And this is part of today's discussion in Tanya. So first let me give you the orally, let me explain it to you. It's very important, not just for today, but for our life as we endeavor to continue growing and learning. When you do a mitzvah, mitzvah means connection. Literally means a commandment. Hasidism brings source material to support the idea that not only is a commandment given to us by a commander, but the act itself is a bond, is a connection. Right? In other words, like this. Avi, you could say, you do a mitzvah, you're listening to Hashem. You listen to your parents, you listen to your wife, you listen, right? But not that itself is a bond. I'm following instructions. Chassidus says it's a lot deeper. By following the instructions, you're binding yourself to the commander. Here, that's a very deep and new idea that Chassidus brought to the Jewish understanding of a doing of a mitzvah. Until Chassidus, until the Baal Shem Tov, the understanding was, you do a mitzvah, Hashem said so. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov and introduces the idea that a mitzvah is a bond, a connection. That by the very fact that you do the mitzvah, you're connected to God. You're bound to God. It's very different. It's much deeper. It has so much more ramifications. Now, this bond that we create when we do a mitzvah, where is this bond? Okay, so we say, well, the bond is here on earth. Well, do I see it? Do I smell it? Do I feel it? Not necessarily. So the Kabbalah, Jewish mystical writing, says that you should know that when you do a mitzvah, you create what's called a unification. In Hebrew, a yichud, or the plural is yichudim, unifications. What are you unifying? When you say unification, you mean two things that were disparate and you bring them together. What are you unifying? You're unifying, in a sense, polar opposites. You're unifying two ideas that don't necessarily go together, and you, through your mitzvah, bring them together. What is the general idea? The general idea of the unification? It's the unification of what's called Kutshu Brichu and Shchinte. Kutshu Brichu means the holy God, the holy blessed God, Kudsha Brichu. Ushchinte is the God's divine presence, which is God's manifestation through the sphere of Malchus, of kingship, which for our purposes now, it means it's the unification of God and us. And God and us, without unification, are very distant. Yes, God made us, right? Moshe, God made us in his image. Very nice that God made us, but then we go off in our own ways. So Baruch, when even though Hashem made us, but we're in left field, there's no unification there. When you do a mitzvah, you bring yourself, Malchus, back to the Creator, back to Kutsha Brichu. And this is phenomenal. When you eat an apple, and before you put the apple in your mouth, you say, Baruch Ato Hashem, you make a bracha, Borei creates, blessed is God who creates the trees of the earth, right? That's a yichud. Those that know the Kabbalistic intentions, think of the different names of God associated with trees, whatever it says in Kabbalah. In other words, different mitzvahs have different aspects of the unification. I told you more than once that I went to a friend of mine in Tzfas who became a Breslover Chassid, and he made Kiddush, and it took him 5 minutes to make Kiddush, 10 minutes, whatever. Quite a long time, and you know, I went to Yeshiva, he didn't, and he's standing and making a 10-minute Kiddush, and I went to Yeshiva, and it doesn't take me 10 minutes to make Kiddush. So I asked him, what are you doing after he made Kiddush? He said to me, I'm thinking when I say the Kiddush, the words and the yichud of what names of God are being put together vis-a-vis the Kiddush that he was taught in Breslov Hasidus or in Kabbalah, whatever the case. Now, that's not the ordinary way that most people make Kiddush, but the fact is that that's what's taking place. And if one is able to do that, kol hakavod, with all due respect. We in Chabad do this unification in the morning, and the unification in the morning, Moshe, is for the entire day. That's why before we begin Baruch Shamar and Chakras, we say L'Shem Yichud Kutsha Brichu Shchite. And when it comes to Ma'ariv and we make the bracha on Sfir Soima, we don't say L'Shem Yichud. And probably in your shul, Moshe, Neish Kodesh, they do say L'Shem Yichud. And Minik Chabad is not to say L'Shem Yichud. Specifically not to say L'Shem Yichud. What's wrong with L'Shem Yichud? We did it already. Their minig is every time you do them a mitzvah. So what this entire parsha, this entire field, is about creating unity in heaven between God and ourselves. So as soon as you say creating Baruch, when you say creating unity, that implies there's disunity. There's a problem. And that's why we need the Yichud to make the correction. So what's the problem? Who's fighting here? Who's fighting? The answer is that Kucha Bricho and Shchite on their own are going in two different directions. Kucha Bricho is going up and Shchite is going down. Imagine Moshe Drucker walking the street, you start looking up and you don't look down. The next thing is you fall on the floor, you trip, you hurt yourself. What if you look down, Avi, the whole time and you don't look up? You're like an animal. An animal looks down the whole time. There needs to be a balance. The balance is the Yichud. So here again, as I said yesterday in the Shir, is an example how Chassidus takes an idea that's brought in Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, you wouldn't hear and read what I just said for you in the last 10 minutes. Because that's not the system of Kabbalah. It just tells you, this is the Yichud, this is it, and go on. Chabad Chassidus opens it up and elaborates. It gives you Mashalom. 1 second, Moshe. Yes, Moshe. No, Moshe.
Yeah, I noticed that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Rabbi, okay. I noticed that there are very, very few times during the year in the Siddur that we have something along these lines, like talking about Nusach Hari. I noticed that before Kiddush of the Yomim Tovim, there's a slightly different Nusach, is what we say, that has to do, that incorporates these it doesn't say the Shem Yichud.
That's right.
But like what we say before Kiddush, right? There's certain very
right. Chakal tapuchin. Yes, but it doesn't. That's not l'shem yichud.
Yeah.
That is a statement, Moshe, that this particular Kiddush on this particular holiday is connecting to holy apples. Chakal tapuchin. It's concepts in Kabbalah. So the wording changes. That's what you're referring to. I also noticed it over the years. Yeah. But this is not about Yichud. Yeah. That's about the content. Okay. Moshe, that's about the content of the Yom Tov as expressed through the prayer. So take for example, Moshe, Shabbos, every Shabbos. What we say Shalosh Shudas at the third meal is very different than what we say Friday night and Shabbos morning. Why? Because there's a different energy happening. So if you were to say the same, the same explanation of what Shabbos is about Kabbalistically, Friday night for Shabbos afternoon for Mincha, you're not getting in. You got the wrong door. Sorry, that was last night. You got to knock on the right door to get in. That's what we're saying.
Right.
That's what we're saying during these. That's what these changes. But here we're talking about the Yichud. A Yichud is a different concept. The Yichud of Kuchu Brichu and Shchinte. Malchus, which is Shchinte, the divine presence, and Kuchu Brichu. Now the Alter Rebbe here in Kuntres Acharon answers a question. He asks a question on himself, on what he said in chapter 40 of Tanya, that seems to imply that thought, when you only think Torah, but you don't speak Torah, nothing takes place. And then he brings a source from Kabbalah which says something does take place. So the Alter Rebbe answers, he reconciles it, and he says that something definitely takes place. But the difference is whether it's coming from below to above or above to below. Or in Hebrew, Avi, it's whether you're talking about the hamshocha. Hamshocha means to draw down. It's coming down. Flow is coming down. Versus halo, which means it's being elevated. And this Baruch is a very important point, and it answers a lot of things that we Why, when we daven and we pray and we learn, and sometimes there's no answer. At least we think there's no answer. There's always an answer, but there's, And the answer could be that your prayers only went up. They didn't cause a reciprocal effect of the flow coming down. And if the prayers only go up, Moshe, you did a great thing. But you're not yet getting the flow. The flow to come down is a different department. So we have two things. And the Alter Rebbe says, that's the difference between speaking words of Torah as you learn to articulate the words with your mouth versus thinking Torah. Thinking Torah only raises the self to Hashem, which is a great thing, but it doesn't cause the reciprocal flow to come down. Whereas when you speak words of Torah, you cause it to actually come down. And this is a fantastic, fantastic insight. I want to learn it now inside. Look at the page. In Lessons in Tanya, those that have it, the Zohar, this is page 267 if you have the book in the note, large note, the last paragraph. The Zohar only means that thought has no effect in drawing down illumination from above. It is true that it is not an arousal from below that elicits an arousal from above. However, thought does have a vital effect above. One's thought and intention are indispensable in elevating one's Torah study and performance of the commandments and affecting a consequent supernal unions. Now, inside the text, Yesh Lomar. Yesh Lomar dahainu lisarusa deleilo. What thought does not accomplish is that there should be an arousal from our God, from above, on its own. That it should be drawn down from above, from God, here below. The thought that rises above, it simply remains there. Greatly increasing the illumination there. Adding light and energy in the world of Atzilus, through the Torah, mitzvahs maisius, and through mitzvahs maisius shebasiya in action. Look at these words. The primary yichud yoni, where does yichud take place? Not here below, it's above. So when we talk about making a yichud, Yichudim, you hear this? Baruch the Alter Rebbe says here, underline it in your Tanya. She'ikir ha-yichud hiu le'mayla. The primary unions take place above in Atzilus. Rak ha-peiros b'olam hazeh. Only the fruits reach this world. Ayidei amshachas oir ma'at mizeir lemata ayidei dibro ma'isa, through the drawing down of a little bit of the light, through speech and action. Mashenkin bihirur. Comparatively speaking, to thinking alone, without speaking, lo nimshach klum, nothing is called forth. The increased illumination that we cause through thinking Torah remains in Atzilus. So it's like on one hand you say, look, hey, I own stock in Atzilus. What better thing could it be? I own stock in Atzilus. Thank you very much. If you don't cash in on the stock in Atzilus, there might be a day it's worth very little. Or even if it stays the same, I knew someone, his father bought a lot of stock in the 1930s and 40s. He passed on. He didn't benefit from it. So his son inherited it, and fine. But I'm saying, having this holiness in Atzilus, so very good. You can put it on your pedigree. I'm a 5-star journal of. I'm a 5-star general in owning stock in Atzilus. Very good. And we say in Yiddish, Yoni, was hab ich von dem? What do I have from it? Nada. So the Alter Rebbe says here, I'm not going to tell you that creating unity in Atzilus and having, that is worthless. But the illumination stays there. If you want the illumination to come down here into your life, you need to articulate the words of Torah. Look what the Alter Rebbe says. Therefore, one does not fulfill their obligation in halachic terms if he just thinks Torah. When we say there's a mitzvah, v'dibarta bam, there's a mitzvah of learning Torah every day, we mean like I'm doing now with my mouth. Not for me to read the Tanya, just That don't do it. For which a person's neshama came below, only to draw down spiritual malations in the lower world, which goes in Beit Chaim, as it says in Kabbalah, Hamshich Oir. Right. Avo, conversely, now he goes back to the elevation from below to above. The elevation from above to below. Here, Moshe, you need to have what we call good thought. The positive intent that comes along, that stems from love and fear of God. The beloved chilu rechimu. Without love and fear, your divine service of Torah mitzvahs doesn't fly upward. It doesn't soar on high. It says over there, that the good thought in that is that which raises Torah mitzvahs aloft. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. That, and this Baruch answers, I think, one of your questions that you wrote to me about, and I'm thankful and continue writing your questions. That there's no contradiction. We need both things here. It's like saying this, Ari. It's like saying like this. I just want to be someone who does mitzvahs and mitzvahs and mitzvahs, but Torah study is not my cup of tea. I'll do the minimal. That's not adequate. And to say the same thing, someone who says just Torah, 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 and forget about mitzvahs. They do mitzvahs, but they're not immersed in the mitzvahs, is also not adequate. So too over here, the Alter Rebbe says, although for the flow of God's energy that was created by the unification requires that one articulate their Torah study with their mouth, but that could be very verbatim and very dry and boring. Just repeat what Rabbi Dalfin says. Repeat what the Rabbi Shapiro says. Repeat what Rabbi Kaplan says. Okay, you're a parakeet, and you're able to repeat very nicely. But if someone were to ask you, do you really understand? Then wait a minute. Not just do you really understand, do you feel? No, I don't feel anything. And again, I always go back to the first conversation I had with you, Moshe, when we came to Beis Shemesh, how people are stale. They're feeling. This is an avodah called avodah of Ave and Yira. And it's a daily avodah. It's like you eat 3 times a day, and imagine a day we don't eat, we're hungry, and we're like, oh, we're all out of whack. Lacking Ave and Yira, lacking intent, and working on intent of your Torah and mitzvahs is a daily thing. You can't rely on what yesterday you were inspired. Yesterday you were shul, and you davened, and you shed a tear, and you felt close to God. What happens the next day? I'm back to the square one. I want to sleep. I want to just finish already in this minyan. I already wait. It's too long, right? What happened? You were all turned on and inspired yesterday. That's the way it works. The body, the animal soul, the animal drive, the lusts, the desires, they're so one with us that takes over. So you have to again reinvest and meditate and reflect and daven and say, I'm not an animal. I'm not an animal. I'm not an animal. I'm a human. I have a God. I have something higher. I am higher. Right? and you turn yourself on to this. That's the Ava and Yira. That's the love and fear, the love and awe. So the Alter Rebbe says both are necessary. You can't just say, well, I'm articulating the words of Torah as when I learn, so the flow is coming down. The flow can come down, but you're a stone. What will it help if the flow comes down to a stone? You're dry, you're boring, you're not excited, right? We need the flow to come down to an excitable person, to a motivated individual, to someone that has a drive and a passion in life and in Torah and in mitzvahs and helping. They're on the go. Just, I want to say, Rabbi Lipsker, of blessed memory, just passed away, the rabbi of the shul on Collins at 95th in Miami, who I knew personally, and I made a tribute for him. I hope you saw it, Chevra. It's online. Right? This man, I knew him. He was so passionate, so passionate. If you ever heard him speak, whether it be in shul or other times, he's full of passion. And trust me, he could have been coasting. Okay? He could have been coasting. The type of balabatim he had and the setup that he had, and believe me, he made it all happen with God's help. But he could have taken a good long vacation and he would have gotten his paycheck and he would have gotten his position and life would have gone on. But no. Every day you wake up with, what more can I do? That drive, that passion. And that's Ava and Yira. That's Ava and Yira. Okay? In the sense of God, in other words, you daven well one day, the next morning you don't say, hey, I davened well yesterday and therefore today I can sit back on my loins. No! You have to feel like you didn't daven at all. It's the first time you're davening. Picture to yourself the first time you found out about Torah, mitzvahs, Hashem, Chassidus, Rebbe, Yiddishkeit. And you say, wow, hey, who am I? Where was I till now? And you get excited. That's what you have to live with every day. I don't care if it's 50 years later, 40 years later. And when you don't, that's when the flow is coming to a stone, even if there's a flow. Many times no flow. But even if there is a flow, it's limited. It's boring. It's unexciting. And it just, you lose your oomph. So that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here. I'm going to stop here. Any questions or comments from anybody? I'd like to give you a minute or two to say, yes, Yoni. Yes, Yoni, today is your father's yahrzeit, right?
Tonight's the yahrzeit.
Okay, so then tomorrow, so tomorrow we should say L'chaim, to mention his name for this year, Shem Mashav and Aliyah.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, what you just said, Rabbi, what you just said about the first time that, the first time you're more enthusiastic and it lit a fuse, even for 20 years ago, 50. I think this is where the Baal Tshuvas have a huge leg up on the FFB people.
Yes.
Because as an FFB person, you don't have that.
Yes, Yoni, right, but Yoni.
You can't even think like that.
Yeah, Yoni, but the problem is that when the Baal Teshuvah becomes FFB, he loses that. Hey,
Right.
So believe me, I thought about when I said that. We have so many Baal Teshuvah, an entire generation, 60s, 70s, 80s. Now it's 2025. Are they still on fire? That's a good question. I don't want to say the answer, and that's what we're going through now. That's what our frum community, with the way I see it, I don't know how you guys see it, but the way I see it, This is a serious issue where even Baal Teshuvah are I've seen it. A lot of them are taking a hiatus. Some of them are dropping out. Some that are not dropping out are just, are covering up and doing things, there's serious issues happening now. And it's all because they're not on fire. They've lost that fire. But I do agree with you that, and the Gemara says it, the place of Baal Teshuvah are, Tzaddikim Gemurim can't stand there, can't be there. Right? That's exactly what you're referring to. But I don't know. I wouldn't today. I think that the message has to be the one that I shared, meaning, in other words, yes, you are about tshuva, but today are you about tshuva? Or today you're ready, hey, about tshuva. I have an entire community that's Bali tshuva, but it's 30, 40 years later. No one looks at themselves as about tshuva. Now it's, so that's a sensitive issue, but it's a very important one. Anyone else want to comment on that? Anything that Avi, Avi, I've heard your voice in a long time, Avi. Say something. No? Okay. Peace. Okay, Chavre. See everyone tomorrow. Zay Gazon. Take care. Good learning. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Zay, take care.
Thank you.